are now live streaming, and would like to therefore just to welcome the members of the public who may have joined on a virtual platform through the various NASA platforms, Twitter, Facebook, or any other connection point. We'd like to welcome you. We're now dealing with agenda item number 6, which is a temporary exemption of Vinek Wind Farm from complying with Appendix 9 of the RPP Grid Code, version 3.1 in South Africa. Mr. Shozi, who's presenting this matter?
Chair, it's going to be really...
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Mavus.
Hi, Chair, it's going to be Dogas will supported by Willie. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Over to you, colleagues, if you can present.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson, and good afternoon, colleagues and members. So the purpose of this submission is to request the Electricity Subcommittee to approve the temporary exemption for Vinek Wind Farm from complying with Appendix 9 of the Renewable Energy Power Plant Grid Code. So the application is a recommendation to the Energy Regulator for approval from the meeting, from the GCAC meeting that took place on the 10th of March. And the details of the application are stated in Table 1 on page 3. So, and just to indicate that this application was actually considered at the ELS meeting of the 3rd of May, and the approved details from the approval from that meeting, the details of that are captured in Table 2. Following that approval, it was picked up that there was a discrepancy between the clauses that were recommended by the GCAC and what was presented at the ELS of 3 May. So clause A 9.2.1 and A 9.2.2 and A 9.2.3 were omitted in the initial submission that was tabled at the ELS of 3 May. So the main reason, or the submission seeks to correct that mistake, just to make sure that the approval of the ELS is aligned to what was recommended by the GCAC. But in terms of the application itself, the applicant is currently not complying with Appendix 9 of the RPP Grid Code, which deals with 6-yearly routine tests. And the main reason for their non-compliance is because of constraints that they're experiencing on the OEM side. So their original equipment manufacturer is having to test several plants who are also due for their 6-yearly routine this year. So they are constrained. So this has affected Vinek Wind Farm as well. But the RPP has put plans in place to complete all the tasks required for the 6-yearly routine by 31 December 2022. So I'll just ask that we move to page 8 for the recommendations. So in terms of the recommendation, it is recommended that the Electricity Subcommittee approve the temporary exemption as outlined in Table 3. This is on page 8, and approve the conditions of the temporary exemption as recommended by the GCAC. And the recommendation for approval is in line with Section 1.7 of the Electricity Delegation Matrix. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Dr. Maybe can you clarify before I open it up? Is this for approval by this committee, or is this a recommendation that needs to go? Are we supposed to recommend to ER for approval?
No, it is for approval by this committee.
All right, thank you. Members, you've got. Thank you, Madam. I'm not sure whether. Oh well, but he will probably assist you with answering. I was just wondering whether Welile would want to add something, but perhaps he will assist with questions from members. Members, any questions? We've got a submission before us. Vinek Wind Farm. Any questions of clarity, guidance? Madam Pungwase? Okay, go ahead now.
Thank you, Chairperson. No, it's not a question, actually. I just wanted to make a comment because it does appear as if it's common for the reasons for application for exemptions being due to the OEM's delays, in managing this 6-yearly assessment process. So it does seem like it's something that's quite common because it's not the first time that we're experiencing this. Is it a commonality amongst the various OEMs, or they rely on one OEM or just the few that experience the influx of all these reviews every 6 years, and hence they can't cope with the number?
Thank you, Madam. It's a clear enough question. Any other question, members? If not, if we can, Ms. Khwabe, your hand was going up and down.
Sorry, Chair. It switches it off itself. Chair, I just want to bring in a matter of accuracy of information in the submission, but all the submissions. It is for accuracy of information should they be audited, these documents audited. Section 7 of all the submissions actually still refers to the old programs according to which the APP was structured, and therefore the budget as well. So from 1 April, we've been using new programs that we approved at last year's planning session. So with respect to all the section 7s of every submission on the agenda today, the link to organizational programs, it should actually read, it's linked to program 1 that talks to regulatory service delivery. That is the new name of the program. We picked the matter up in EXCO just before this meeting, and we have sent the correct information to managers, but I just felt for record purposes, I need to inform the ELS of this as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you for that. And that's for enhancements, colleagues. There is a question, Dorcas, if you can assist, please, with that question.
Okay. So in terms of, because the question was why is it common for these OEMs to be constrained, or is it a common thing? So in terms of these plans that are coming for six-yearly routine tests now, most of them, they reach their commercial operation date either starting 2014, 2015, and 2016. And yes, some of them, a number of them, you might find that they are actually using the same OEMs, and they depend on the same resources to help them with assessing and making these tests for 6-yearly routine tests. So they commissioned a number of plans, let's say in 2016, and now all those plans are now due for 6-yearly routine. So that's basically what I can indicate in terms of why a number of them have been coming with requests for exemptions due to OEM constraints. Previously, it was actually also the whole lockdown thing, but now it's just with everything being opened, they are able to come and assist, but a number of these plans need assistance with those tests. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. There is a note on the chat. Also, members, if you can see the note from Mr. Tlachega, also explaining the limited number of OEMs in South Africa. So I think it's from that. But Madam Pongoswe, are you answered, ma'am?
Yes, Chairperson, I am answered. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess maybe as a just Mr. Sibanda.
Yeah, sorry, Chairperson. Chair, mine is just a procedure issue. So as I understand it, this is a correction of a submission that we considered previously. But I'm not sure in terms of decision making now, what happens to the previous decision. Because in the recommendations, we're simply approving this submission, but my understanding is it was previously approved, Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Sibanda, for noting that, and also the FUNCAS official principle, because we still have a decision of this committee. Can we be guided from RSU? If we can provide guidance, please. I think in the manner in which this particular recommendation is crafted, and also in terms of the decision that is sought from this committee. Mr. Chokwe?
Chair, if I may, apologies, Mr. Chokwe is not in today. I'm trying to open the actual submission, but I think it should have come as an amendment of the previous decision, not as a standalone recommendation, Chair, so that it doesn't lose history.
But I think, Mr. Ndanzi, the question is this would not amount to us revisiting our own decision, would it?
Yeah, Chair, the disadvantage is that I'm struggling to open this document. It's a recommendation. I've now managed to open it, Chair.
Okay. I see Mr. Murati's hand is up. Maybe he may assist. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think it wouldn't, the principle of functus officio only applies to instances where at our own instance we're doing that. But Section 16 of the ERA enables us to vary, suspend, and all those kind of things related to license conditions, which this submission, it's anchored on that particular provision. And it's premised on that there must be an application, and there was an application for that. So we are not unlawful in deciding on this submission.
Okay. No, thank you. So the only issue is that it must make reference, although in the body of the document it does talk to the error that was there previously, but it must reference the previous decision. Correct?
It is correct, Chairperson.
All right. Thank you. So, any suggestion? Yes, Advocate Stone.
Chair, thanks, Chair. I was just going to say that maybe we may need to revisit that paragraph 6 on page 9, which clearly states that we have approved this particular application on the 3rd of May 2022. So in light of what Mr. Morati has indicated, we may want to really refine that such that if this document is to be discovered, it clearly links up to the process that he sort of mentioned. So if he can assist the team in enhancing that particular paragraph and what follows under 6.2 and the others. In fact, the numbering needs to be corrected there. Thanks, Chairperson, because it states as a fact that we did approve this particular application in terms of the exemption. So if he can assist the team to enhance that part of the submission. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Advocate. So, team, so Mr. Morati, you'll assist the team to enhance that paragraph, but I'm assuming that it doesn't change the submission. So that it doesn't change the recommendations which are on page 8, only that we need to enhance that paragraph 6 and also indicate the link with the previous approval. I assume that it doesn't change the recommendations though. And if it doesn't, if we can then consider those recommendations members which are on page 8, it's paragraph 14. Again, the numbering. So it says it's 14, but it's 14.2. There is no 14.1. And in the main body, it's 14.1.1. And then if you can just correct the numbering there, please, so that it becomes 14.1. And then so it links nicely with 14.1.1. So those are the, yes, Advocate?
Chair, just for clarity, for my understanding as well, the recommendation, the application went through the GCAC and it comes to the regulator. Is it now the regulator or rather the team that recommends, or is it comes through as a recommendation from the GCAC? That is not clear to me. If it can be clarified to me, otherwise I do not have any issues with the submission other the point that we discussed earlier. So if I can be given clarity on that. Thanks, Chair.
Dorcas, if you can assist, please, or Welly. Is this a recommendation from the GCAC or is it a recommendation from the team?
Chair, thank you, Advocate, for the question. We are simply wanting to align the decision of the ELS with the recommendations that were made by the GCAC. So in other words, when the GCAC made the decision, those clauses that were excluded were there. However, in the previous ELS submission, they were not there. So we're just wanting to align the decision of the ELS with the recommendation that was made by the GCAC. Thank you.
All right. For the purpose of clarity, again, if we can just, it's not the decision of the GCAC, correct? It is a recommendation from the GCAC that the team has put forward, correct? It's not a decision of the of the GCAC because they cannot make that decision, correct?
That is correct, Chair.
All right, thank you. All right. So with that, colleagues, can we then look at that recommendation and by show of hands, if we support that recommendation that we have in there with all of the enhancements that have been agreed in terms of ensuring alignment with the previous approval, as well as ensuring, firstly, just correcting the numbering and so forth. Thanks. I see your hand is up. Advocate Sitole, Mr. Sibanda. Thank you, Madam Pongose. I also support. So, colleagues, you've got your decision, but you please do make those alignment and correction and enhancements as been requested by the members. Thank you. If we can now swiftly move to agenda item number 7. Mr. Mavuso, who's presenting this one?
Thanks, Chair. I think maybe before I give it to the presenter, which will be Elvis, let me just maybe make an intro to this. To say this submission, Chair, is a culmination of work that we've been doing since Feb, when we were approached by the presidency to talk about the whole issue of the PPA, and we had also we started understanding each one another on this one. And they had taken also a legal opinion because there was a complaint placed by stakeholders that this requirement was basically putting itself in the critical path of the applicants, and since it's a very big document and very difficult to put together, it was becoming very problematic. And but I think I've mentioned this before, Chair. But the one thing that I want, Chair, I would be happy that members could consider is the whole issue of whether, if a procedure or a regulation in terms of our work is silent on something, does that mean that we, in execution of our duties, in relation to the mandate that we have, does it say that we cannot ask for specific things? Because there are times where, for example, either in the procedures or in the regulations, things are not mentioned expressly. But what does this actually mean? But there's a big question about, and this submission is in line with the type of other dynamics that are going to come up. With those words, Chair, I will give it to Elvis to present the submission. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mavuso. Elvis, as you present, please indicate, because there are 2 attachments there. Please talk to the one that you want the members to focus on. Thanks. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning. Good afternoon to you and the members and colleagues. We will talk mostly in the procedure itself, because the application form is just to align with the requirement of the procedure. So mostly it will be the revised procedure that we'll focus on. The purpose of this submission is to request the Electricity Subcommittee to approve the revised registration procedure and also approve the revised registration application form. The approval of the procedure and the application form is delegated to the ELS as per paragraph 6.1.4 of the delegation matrix. Chairperson, there are two maybe unique features of this revised procedure. One is to remove the PPA as a registration requirement. You'll recall previously we were noting the PPA whereby maybe bilaterals we have a willing buyer and willing seller that qualifies for registration, and NERSA will note the PPA and also note the tariff. But then with the presidency approaching NERSA in this requirement, it was then seen that maybe this requirement should be removed. And secondly, the procedure proposed that the full-time regulator member responsible for electricity be authorized to approve registration applications. This, it was just for efficiency reasons to improve in our processing timelines. The legal analysis of the PPA requirements are outlined on section 4.3 of this submission. Members are therefore requested to approve the recommendations in section 14 of the submission. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Matakwan. I think, Mr. Tikwana, the only challenge is that we note that Mr. Murati has indicated earlier that he'll be signing off at Q2, has indeed signed off. So I don't know if we need any bigger support. Whether have you got somebody else that may assist you? If there are any legal questions.
We are mainly dependent on the legal team. I'm not sure if Mr. Murati have left anyone from legal that might support us. Should there be legal questions? Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Just before we engage with document, colleagues, I just want to point out there are two documents. The first, the first procedure is the old procedure, which was approved last year on the 10th of October. The document that we should be focusing on is the second one, which is a reviewed one. But maybe just to also clarify that, as Mr. Choke would like to always remind us, see, this is not asking that the actual registration be delegated to the FTRM, because that cannot be done, but rather asking that there will be standing instructions that to be given to the FTRM to ensure that there will be a speedy resolution of this matter. But in the event, and the FTRM will only deal with those that have been dealt with by REC previously in terms of registration, and that if there's any peculiarity that will still need to then be discussed. If there's a peculiarity with any of the applications or for registration, is that those peculiarities will be dealt with by the REC, which has been delegated with this process, and that the standing order will be such that whatever that has been then approved by the FTRM gets noted by the REC. So that is the request. And also, I just thought it would be useful to note the positive feedback we've had with the last approvals, which we basically managed to do within 19 days. That received a very positive feedback in the media, but also not just in the media, but by our political principals. And we don't believe that it actually compromised the process. So with that, members, can I open up this discussion? Can I open up this document for discussion? And hopefully Mr. Matikwana and the team would be able to respond even if there are legal matters, which if they can't be responded to directly, we will assist, we'll request somebody from legal to be able to provide some kind of guidance. So members, the document is before us for approval, but can I see by show of hands, members, if you've got any comments, questions on the document itself? And even possibly enhancement. Thank you. Over to you, Advocate Sitona.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, maybe for me, what I would have appreciated from the team was to just take an example of a PPA and indicate, or rather, then link the submission to some of the provisions that are in the PPA for us to say that this is not what NESA should be doing in terms of those conditions that are there. And I may be wrong. I recall there is a provision in some of the PPAs that gives the regulator powers to inspect the registrant's premises. And that for me, it's either if we take it out of the PPA, then it should be in the conditions of registration. So it would have been proper from where I'm sitting to just get an analysis of a typical PPA and the terms and conditions, or rather the terms thereof, and also to see if there's been an analysis of what is not a responsibility of NESA, and some of those that are, how do we then cover them, and where do we cover them in terms of that? So as I said, I recall there is one provision in some of these PPAs that gives NESA powers to inspect the premises of a registrant. I may be wrong, maybe mixing it up with some, but I recall I did see this. The other thing is, Chairperson, is that maybe it should have also been important for the team to indicate the history of this in terms of what is it that led NESA to request that the PPAs be attached. And if it was made an ER resolution, then we need to look at the processes in terms of how then do we change that particular decision, and it also links up with the principle of functus officio, to say that can we then now change that now as NESA. So that for me was not really coming clear, not unless I missed it in the submission. Those were the 2 points, Chair, that I would like the team ELR to assist me to understand in terms of the proposal that they're making. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Advocate. Mr. Sibanda, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, perhaps it would have assisted if the document had tracked changes to the extent that the revised document has been amended. But be that as it may, Chair, when I looked at the reasons for the amendment, especially 4.2.2, it talks about bottlenecks that come in the way of facilitating investments in the new generation capacity. However, when I look at the submission itself, and apart from the PPA issue, it's not clear to me where the bottleneck lies and whether what we are proposing is actually meant to deal with that bottleneck, apart from the PPA matter, which I understand, and I'm all for reducing the regulatory burden to the extent that NESA is not missing anything by not requiring a PPA going forward. So for me, I think that would also have assisted to say, what is it that we will be missing if we no longer require PPAs as part of the process. Now, coming to the second part of requiring standing instruction to the FTRM. So for me, again, the question is, it's not apparent to me where the bottleneck is in terms of the approval process, because when you look at the new procedure, Anisha, I think it's Anisha A on page 35, and you compare it with the previous or the current process, you still have 63 days to consider. And I know, Chair, you indicated that you were able to approve the recent ones within a much shorter period of time. But I'm looking at the flowchart, and it gives me 63 days. The previous one also had 63 days. Actually, with the new one, if you consider the the time, I think there are a number of days that are not included there. It's advise applicant to pay registration fee, so that has got no number of days. But in the previous process, it was given about 2 days. So if you factor that in, this comes to 65 days for the new process. Hence, I'm saying it's not clear to me how we are trying to improve efficiencies, as was indicated in the presentation, that part of this is to improve efficiencies. But if you look at the flowchart, it's not apparent how we are doing that. And so for me, I remain with a question that says, but then how will the standing instruction assist in terms of unblocking the bottleneck? But secondly, I also need perhaps just to get a clear understanding of the difference between a standing instruction and a full delegation. Again, I think it's something that is not clear to me, and perhaps someone from legal or RSU can assist with this one, Chairperson. But looking at the submission, I would have wanted more information that says to me, if we do this, these are the benefits, but also we also need to look at what are the risks. So what are the pros and cons if we were to delegate this to the FTRM? What are the likely risks? What are the likely benefits, and so forth and so on? So that information, Chairperson, is not clear, or it's not apparent to me. Apart from the issue of the PPA, like I indicated, which if legal says it's okay, then I'm happy with. But in terms of the delegation, it's not clear how that's going to improve the efficiencies, just looking at the flowchart. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. Any further questions from members? If not, and it's a pity because legal, I'm not sure if there's anybody from legal who can assist Mr. Matikwan. But maybe can I just venture a little bit? I know that, and apologies, colleagues, because I would have liked to have had legal to actually respond to this. I just want to provide a more broader background to this. And then, of course, Mr. Mavuso and the team can then assist with specific questions from advocate and also Mr. Sibanda. I think the challenge here, colleagues, is that when we started the process of registration, we looked at that and handled it in the same manner as we were looking at licensing, and imposed Section 10 of the Act, which in respect of registration, the that section is very specific, even for instance, in terms of the conditions that can be imposed on a registrant. It does not empower us to even bring to bear issues of tariffing, which are section 15.2 of the Act, which are in respect of licensed activities. But for registrants, for registrations, and especially in the manner that the issues that the activities that are supposed to be registered are so indicated in terms of that schedule. It's quite clear that a number of things that we're imposing on registrants, both in terms of registration and also perhaps as us trying to impose conditions, that section 9.4 of the Act is very specific. It talks about the only conditions that the regulator can impose on registrants is provision of data. That in fact, the whole purpose of registration is about data, it's about provision of data. Which data is supposed to assist? Yes, the issue is it talks about adherence to the provisions of this Act. And the question that then arises in terms of the provisions of this Act is that does it mean licensing conditions? Then to what extent would Section 8 be relevant here? So it would have been useful, as Mr. Murati, who has been very engaged with this process for quite a while, was here to elaborate a bit further. But it is quite clear, colleagues, that it became quite apparent, and it's even worse, as indicated by Mr. Mavuso, and he can add this, that the legal opinion, for instance, taken by the presidency, is that all the issues that we were asking about, which were in respect of licensing, do not apply to the registration process. The Act is very specific about what we can ask for in terms of registration, and registration is merely about provision of data. It seems that and it's even worse if it's about bilateral contracts, that we are not necessarily empowered to be regulating own use or bilateral contracts. All issues that are related to bilateral contracts, issues between a willing buyer and a willing seller. The question is the regulator empowered to then be talking to a power purchase agreement between two parties that have negotiated both the terms of agreement between them, including pricing? Can we get involved? And it became quite clear that, in fact, the regulator is not empowered to do that. So, in essence, that's where it was. So, the procedure itself was not a revision, but was a correction in terms of us saying, was there an overreach by the regulator, us giving ourselves powers that are not provided for in the Act, and therefore eliminating those things that are not empowered by the Act. But it is clear that the issue is about adherence to the provisions of this Act. What does that mean? Therefore, if it's about ensuring adherence to the provisions of this Act, both in terms of the granting of the registration process itself, what are those provisions of the Act that needs to be adhered to? The guideline, the notice is very clear about that. It's about the grid code, but I'm not too sure whether there's anything else other than what is there in terms of the grid code. That's what is the issue here. So that's the first one. Now, but it is very clear about the provision in terms of provision of information to the energy regulator. So, and it's that information that needs to be identified. What is that information that needs to be provided by the to the energy regulator? So, and does the form, therefore, which or the information that is sought from the registrants, have we clearly identified that information that is supported by the schedule? Because it looks like the information that is supported by the schedule that is required is only in respect of compliance of compliance with the grid code. So that is the one issue, but it's something that colleagues can then expand on, that in the past there's been an overreach. So that is the first one. The issue of the bottlenecks, Mr. Sibanda. The whole point here is that if the process is really about provision of information, to what extent can we simplify this and not be seen as in terms of our process? How can we simplify this so that we continue to be seen to be adding value? Because in whatever that we are doing must be adding value. So if we're coming up with something that is not adding value to the process, the question is why do it? So, and then the standing orders, I think RSU can then explain that better than I can. But the whole point here is that, like we do in respect of applications for treatment of confidential information, clearly even on this particular one, it's something that can still be dealt with that way, because in terms of value add, the question is how do we add value? So that is the issue. So I thought I would start there. I'm not sure whether I hope that this assists in the absence of Mr. Murati. But all we are trying to do here is to make sure that we're not giving ourselves powers that we don't have. And therefore, whatever that we are doing is in fact adding value. So the fact that we may have done it in the past in terms of registrants, the question is where we actually empowered to even ask for those PPAs in terms of the registration process. Because I can understand in terms of licensing, especially 15.2 is actually applicable, but for registration, 15.2 does not apply because that's a condition of license. So can I hand over to the colleagues to maybe Mr. Matikwane, if you can be assisted as well by whoever that may assist you to respond to any of the issues that perhaps I didn't touch in my broad response. Thanks. Over to you. And Mr. Mavuso, please assist as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think you have covered most of Ms. Advocate Stole's question of why were we requesting the PPA from the first place, and I think you have also indicated that this was it was a matter of alignment from registration and licensing. When this registration process we introduced, we wanted to also take some of the procedures from licensing, only to find that we end up requesting the PPA. And when this new threshold was increased, then the PPA was, when we are revising the registration procedure, we did not remove the requirement of a PPA. We're still on the alignment of licensing instead of registration. Coming to the point Mr. Sibanda was highlighting on the number of days, on why do we think authorizing the full-time regulator member will improve efficiency. I think there is an error on our procedure there. We're actually looking into revising the number of days from the 45 days to 35 days once the full-time regulator member is empowered to approve a registration application as a standing instruction. And he also asked, how is it gonna really help assist us? If you check, currently the registration is delegated to a regulator executive committee, and it sits twice in a month. And when this is delegated to a full-time regulator member, the team can be able to prepare a memo each and every week, meaning maybe at least 4 times in a month, we could be able to prepare a submission or via a memo to the full-time regulator member. In that way, it will assist in streamlining our processes for registration. In terms of the difference between standing instruction and a full delegation, I might require RSU to assist us here because it's more legal on its nature than technically. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Mr. Semel, if you can assist again as well, please.
Yeah, I will try to assist, Chair. The CEO asked, additional question. One of them is like, shouldn't this be a condition of the license? The answer is no. The condition of the license are in the Act. And then the other one is like, it gives us powers to inspect the facility. It's not in the PPA. It's in the Regulation Act. That's the one that gives us powers to inspect any facility or to request for provision of information, as you said. Chair, I think the other one that came from Mr. Sibanda, which I think is very important, it's like, what's missing? To be honest, I think you responded to that. Even Elvis responded to that. When we started registration, we thought we were doing licensing light. Okay, so we're not really empowered to request for the PPA or to even request some of the information. The only condition that's there is that the applicant must pay registration fee. And Chair, when it comes to Mrs. Banda as well, in terms of the timelines, I think we can give you the correct timelines. And Mr. Matikona has already mentioned that they made mistakes in terms of the timeline. It should be far much shorter than that. And then I must emphasize that, we only start counting the number of days once we receive the information. Like, for instance, we won't be able to do anything to the application up until the applicant has paid the registration fee. It's then that we start counting the number of days. And the other one, in terms of risks, pros and cons, Chair, as far as I'm concerned, I think the risks are lower now. The fact that we don't request for the PPA, and the fact that we're requesting standing instruction for this to go to the full-time regulator member, this will assist a lot, Chair, in terms of making sure that the timelines are shortened further. In the future, we may look at technology as well to increase the number of days for doing our registration. And in terms of Mr. Gumede, I think he provided a lot of clarification. I don't think there's anything for me to comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siamela. Do you want to make any additions, perhaps? Mr. Ndanzi, do you want to assist with the difference between standing instruction and the full delegation? And maybe, I don't know whether Mr. Bavuso, you want to add anything to what the colleagues have added. But Mr. Ndanzi first, please, to you, sir.
Yeah, Chair, maybe Mr. Murati can clarify better, Chair. Thanks.
Unfortunately, he's not. He actually had to sign off. There's a matter that he's working on, a court settlement.
Oh, apologies, Chair. I won't be able to explain that one. Thanks.
And Mr. Chopwa is not here because he's the one that does it very, very well.
Yes, he has a family commitment. He's not here. I
see. Okay, but colleagues, in essence, in terms of those standing instructions, we actually already have them in terms of how we deal with application for confidential information. And the logic, if you like, is one that says, unfortunately, the National Energy Act does not give powers to a single member of the regulator. It's the ER itself as a full body of 9 that is empowered to make decisions, or it can delegate its decision-making to subcommittees. That's it. But it cannot delegate anything to a single member of the committee. However, for efficiency purposes, there are those matters that are fairly routine in terms of not applying, for instance, in terms of confidentialities. There may have been decisions that have been made by because the committee that is delegated to deal with the applications, for instance, for treatment of confidential information is the REC, and that committee would have, if it has made a pronouncement in terms of how it deals with a particular matter in terms of confidentiality, that then becomes can then become a standing instruction to the FTRM consent, such that we don't have to wait for an REC meeting for a decision on confidentiality matters, except on items on issues that the REC would not have made a pronouncement on. This is very similar in respect of this is very similar in respect of this of this registration process, precisely because in terms of the things that in terms of the condition, as Mr. CML has really indicated, that the key issue here is payment of that registration fee, and also just to check in terms of documentation whether, for instance, a particular registrant has an agreement with an NSP, and that's what the team actually looks at. And unless there's something which is in variance with any of the decisions that have been made by the REC, that can be delegated to, not delegated, but there can be a standing instruction to the FTRM consent to be able to just approve that, then bring the matter up and bring the list of those that have been noted or that have been approved, if you like, by the full-time member. They then brought to the REC for noting. In the same manner, in the same way as we do with application for confidentialities. So in essence, that's what this process is about. I'm not sure, colleagues, whether we feel that we've answered all your questions. Advocate, I see you've got your hand up, your follow-up.
Yes, Chair. I think Team ELR, for me, didn't really give me a response in a satisfactory manner to my question that relates to whether was there a decision of the ER for us to require PPAs when dealing with registrations or not. I seem to be hearing them to say that impliedly there wasn't a direct decision, but the team tried when we were starting with the registration process to deal with those applications as if they were licensing processes. And if they can just clarify that for me, that there wasn't such a decision, and therefore then with this particular submission, we are trying to correct things that we were requesting for registration that we shouldn't have been doing because we do not have those powers. If they can just clarify that for me, I'll appreciate it. Unless, because I may have been missing a response in relation to that. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Advocate. Clear question, Mr. Siamela, if we can provide a clear answer as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I just want to provide some bit of background. When it comes to those projects that are coming from the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, we normally, take the PPA for approval to the energy regulator. Reason being that later on, the post-recovery mechanism that will be done to make sure that, ESCOM gets its money back. However, for registration, there was no energy regulator decision. As much as I said at the beginning that when we started with registration, we're trying to do something else called licensing light. So we try to follow the licensing process because we're used to doing that before we start doing registration properly. Thank you.
Thank you. Advocate,
I'm covered, Chairperson.
You are covered. You are covered.
Yes,
okay,
I'm covered. I've just heard, yes, when he said we were trying to do a light licensing. And yes, I do. Thanks, Chair.
Right. Okay, thank you, Madam. Mr. Sibanda, your follow-up, sir?
Yes, Chair, thank you. So in terms of procedure, and I'm looking at 4.2.3 and 4.2.4. Now, 4.2.3 says the revised procedure proposes that the approval be delegated to REC for noting the registration. Surely that should be coming from the REC, isn't it? Because that's the committee that is currently delegated to deal with the registrations. And so that proposal should be coming from the REC to ER. And then the next one, it is proposed that the ER authorize the FTRM. Again, it should then be the ER that makes that decision. But then I see in the recommendations, once we approve the revised procedures and registration form, they already contain that standing instruction to the FTRM. So I'm just thinking in terms of procedure, how then do we deal with this, Chair? Thanks.
Thank you. Assistance with that? Yes, Mr. Mwanza.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. The procedure, as we were advised by RSU, is that we must first get the procedure right, approved. And in terms of our delegation matrix, the registration procedures should be, the amendment of it should be approved by the ELS. And once we had that approval of the revised procedure, we then take the approved revised procedure to the energy regulator to note it so that it will empower the implementation of amending the delegation matrix to issue the standing instruction to the FTRM. Thank you.
Thank you. It seems clear, Mr. Sibanda. I'm not sure whether you are answered.
Yeah, Chairperson, I'll accept, Chair. Thanks.
All right, thank you. But the matter will still need to go to ER for noting, as indicated, that it then empowers the amendment of delegation matrices if it needs to be amended. But in this case, the delegation still stays with the REC, but the main issue is the standing instruction. So it goes to the ER for noting, but the actual powers rest with the ELS government. Thank you. With that, colleagues, can I take us then to the decision if our answers have been the answers have been provided by the team. The recommendation is on page on the overstamped page 6, and that's paragraph 14. So members can perhaps by show of hands, if we can then maybe approve that. And clearly paragraph C does 14C does indicate that we do need to sort of go to the ER for to actually note the actual revised procedure. Colleagues, by show of hands, can I see if we do support the recommendations? Thank you, Madam Pungose. Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. Thank you, Advocate. I also support. Thank you, Mr. Mavuso. You've got your decision. So we step off item number 7. Let's go to item number 8. Mr. Mavuso, who's presenting that?
Okay, Chair, the two following submissions will be presented by Chisilo, 7 and 8. Sorry, 8. Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Mwanza, if we can present, if we can present item 8, and then we can, unless you want to do item 8 and 9 together, we can still do that, but we'll need to then go to the individual items for the decision. Mr. Mwanza.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I would like to do them simultaneously. They are very similar in nature. The purpose of these two submissions is to request the Electricity Subcommittee to recommend to the energy regulator to note the exemption for 1, Estancia Solar Pty Ltd to register its generation facility. Number 2, to also recommend to the energy regulator to note the exemption of Attica Energy Pty Ltd to register its generation facility. The common denominator in these two applications is that these two generation facilities, they don't have a point of connection. Hence, in accordance to the notice, they are exempted. And the Estancia it's for commercial purpose to sell its generated energy to a mining load. However, Attica is for self-consumption, is also for a mining load. Therefore, Chairperson, I would like to go to the recommendation as detailed in the submission, page 6 of 79 in item number 8. It is therefore recommended that the Electricity Subcommittee recommend that the energy regulator note the exemption for Estancia Solar Pty Ltd to register its 30 megawatt solar PV generation facility located at Portion 3 Farm, Fontaine, in Msukwalikwa local municipality, Mpumalanga province. Just to add, this applicant is one of those who intend to install a battery storage, but they are so limited in terms of financial implication and technical, but they do wish to have a better energy storage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, can I ask that we, in terms of questions, can we deal with questions in terms of both item 8 and item 9? However, we will then, in terms of a decision, we'll then deal with each item separately. But if we can then ask, as indicated by Mr. Mwanza, these two are very, very similar. They both don't have a point of connection, and hence they are actually exempt from both licensing and registration, by the way. So that is the issue with them. Members, if you can please engage with the submissions. Are there any questions? Once you are okay, thank you, Mrs. Wanda. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson. I do support the recommendation. I just have a question regarding these exemptions. Now, are entities expected to approach NERSA for exemption, or is it assumed that if they satisfy the requirements of the notice, then they don't have to approach the regulator? But also, if we grant the exemption, what is it that we communicate? Is it just a letter that says you are exempted, or do we issue an exemption certificate? I know with other regulators, if you undertake an activity that is exempted, you are issued with an exemption certificate. So I wasn't quite too sure how we deal with this internally, and I expect that perhaps we'll be seeing more of these exemptions going forward. But I guess it also assists in terms of compliance monitoring, to know that this particular facility has been exempted, but I wasn't too sure in terms of our internal processes, how we go about that change. Just for clarity purposes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. Maybe can I then add to your question, because I did want to pose it, but I thought it would be useful to pose it in a form of platform like this, to then say, considering that this in fact is actually exempt by the law itself, is exempted by the schedule, and perhaps the colleagues may just still need to check whether there is honestly no point of connection, because if somebody may just come and state that there is no point of connection, but there may well be a point of connection. Perhaps the colleagues, that's all they need to actually satisfy themselves that this particular application, this particular applicant who I was applying for exemption is in fact exempt, in the sense that there is indeed no point of connection. But the question I'm then asking, should we not also, on this one, because the reason why it's coming to us and not going to the REC, for instance, is that unfortunately this has not been delegated to the REC. It's not delegated to anybody. Actually, that's why it's coming to the ELS, who then has to recommend to the ER. But shouldn't also be looking to have a standing instruction to the FTRM on this matter? So that is the question that I would ask. So when colleagues respond, if they can maybe respond to that as well. But before they do, I see your hand is up, Madam Pungose. If you can go ahead, Madam.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I wanted to ask a question on item 9, which is the exemption for Attica Energy, on clause 5.1.9 on page 4. You know, where it was said that as per the preliminary analysis from Petroleum Licensing Compliance and Dispute Resolution Department, the storage facility is used solely for own final use and therefore excluded from licensing as per the Act. So what I wanted to just find out, even though the storage facility is not licensed, who does the inspection, for instance, for safety? Is NERSA is not involved in this at all, or is it the environmental authorities? That's what I wanted to verify. Because the fact of the matter, it is petroleum, it is some storage facility on site. So there's some safety issues that need to be adhered to. So I wanted to know, are we not involved at all? Or is it the environmental authorities who are responsible for for routine checkups and safety assessments? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam, for your question. So over to you, Mr. Mwanza, supported by your bosses.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with Mr. Sibanda's questions. I will start with the issue of what do we issue after this. We have done one before, and we have issued a letter of exemption to the applicant. Now, the first question from Mr. Sibanda regarding dealing with this exemption is that normally what we will do, we will advise an applicant whenever they approach NERSA, if they declare that they don't have a point of connection, which also means they don't have a consent letter from the network service provider. We will advise them that in accordance with the notice, you are exempted to register and also to license. But with these two particular applicants, they have requested a letter from NERSA that for the sake of their investors and some financial implication, they will want a formal letter detailing that they are exempted. Hence, we are taking this matter to ER for noting, because within the scope of our delegation, this activity was not there. Hence, we are following this route. And secondly, Mr. Gumede, it is our intention to include this into the delegation metrics as a standing instruction. We have been in communication with RSU with regard to that. And we also welcome the advice to say it will be proper to do an inspection and verify that indeed there is no point of connection. Lastly, with regard to Ms. Mpongose's question, the Department of Environmental Affairs is responsible for a routine. There's a frequency where they conduct this inspection on the storage facility. What we have discovered is that the applicant, the Attica applicant, they store fuel on site. And when we inquire with them, they detail us that they do have a storage facility. Then we consulted with our colleagues from the petroleum side to say, what do we do if we have something like this? And they have advised that a storage facility for own use is exempted to license. However, they have a verification process that they do, and we have advised the applicant to do so it's some form of a registration. Hence they call it the verification process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mwanza. I think your responses are pretty clear. So perhaps unless Mr. Siemela wants to add something.
Chair, no. I think he covered all the questions, unless if there are follow-up questions.
Thank you. The one thing that I do want to add, I guess, Madam Pongo says that the beauty with our, well, it's a beauty with our environmental, with our regulatory system, which can be a burden though to a licensee, is that remember the OSH Act still applies, and also when we are talking about a hazardous material like diesel or petrol or any of those things, especially with things that are flammable. Local government also comes in because in terms of preventing fires and what have you, local government needs to. So there are lots of other regulatory authorities that also become involved in this. Although they may not be a petroleum license, but because you're storing a flammable liquid, there are other laws of the country and other people like the Department of Labor, who are the custodian of the OSH Act, as you know. They are the ones that come into this thing. But clearly, where possible, some kind of partnerships between ourselves and them will always be required, so that we don't encroach in other regulators' domain, but at the same time we ensure that there is total regulation where that is required. Thanks for that. I'm not sure, colleagues, are there any members? Are there any follow-ups on the either one of these submissions? If none, can I then take you back to item number 8 and take you for a decision there, which is on overstamp page 6, the green page 6 of the submission, or page 6 of the submission itself. The recommendation is on paragraph 15. By show of hands, members, if you support the recommendation that we recommend to ER to note the exemption of the Stantia Solar Pty Limited to register, or rather that it doesn't need to register its 30 megawatt solar plant. Thank you, Advocate. Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. I also note, Madam Pongosa, would you support that recommendation, ma'am?
Yes, Chairperson, I was struggling to raise a hand.
John. Okay, thanks, Madam. Thank you, ma'am. Can I then again take us to the next item, and that one again, it's on page 6. That's on page 6 again. It's paragraph 15. By show of hands, members, if you do support that recommendation. In this particular case, is the exemption of Attica Energy Pty Limited to register its hybrid generation facility consisting of a 1 megawatt gas to power generator, 1.54 megawatt solar PV, and 1.2 megawatt battery energy storage system. By show of hands, members, if we remember that. Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. Thank you, Madam Pungose and Advocate Sitole. I also support. By the way, I must admit, I was very encouraged by this one. So they don't just have a solar PV, but they've got storage, battery storage, great clean energy storage, plus they've got their own backup system. So that is a showcase to indicate that they are totally off the grid. They don't have a point of connection. As indicated, I think we're going to see a whole lot more of these. And I think I like the message on this one that says, people don't go off grid during the day, and when the sun sets, they come back on grid and put pressure on the grid, that they are providing completely for their needs. And I think we should congratulate people like this and encourage more, so that at least we can deal with the issues that are related to supply challenges in the country. Thanks, members, for your decision. And my assumption, by the way, is that the issue of the delegation would then be dealt with as part of this, including the standing instruction as per the discussion. So with that, can I then take you to item number 10?
Chair, this one is going to be presented by Tsepo, but I think, Chair, we're going to be shortchanged a bit because we needed Mboniseni for this one. But I think since we've been dealing with it for the last week or so, maybe Tsepo is in a position to cover all the issues. Thank you very much. Tsepo, can you please present?
Thank you, Mr. Mavuso. Good afternoon, Chairperson and members. This is the application by Greenstone Energy RF Limited to distribute electricity to an area, i.e. a private development within Limbro Park from its exempted generator. Chairperson, we received this application in October 2021. We have consulted with few individuals and bodies. Firstly, we consulted with Greenstone Energy, we consulted with Eskom Distribution, we consulted with Salga, AMEU, and NERSA Legal Advisory Services. Chairperson, let me take you through to the purpose of this submission. The purpose of this submission is to request the Electricity Subcommittee to recommend to the Energy Regulator that the application by Greenstone Energy RF Limited to distribute to an area within Limbro Park be disapproved. 2, Greenstone Energy RF Limited can only will its energy to its customers or to the point of consumption through a distribution licensee's network, i.e. Eskom network, and be charged a wheeling tariff. If it does wheel the electricity, then its previous exempted generator will have a point of connection on a distribution network and will need to be registered. Lastly, the licensing exemption and registration notice as published in the Government Gazette is mute on distribution facility connection. With exempted or registered generation facilities to customers or to point of consumption. And therefore, the prescripts of Electricity Regulation Act of 2003, number 4 of 2006 applies. Thank you, Chairperson. I present this submission.
Thank you. Tsepo, there's just one part that you missed. You jumped into saying it should be disapproved, but you didn't quite indicate why. That this area is licensed to somebody else.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think the issues why the reasons for decision are captured in the reasons for the decision, but maybe if we go to 4.2, where we tabulated the issues with this submission. The first reason is that this Greenstone application approval will create supply area within another, i.e. network islanding, as prohibited by Section 9 of the rules. Number 2, Limbro Park is already licensed to Eskom as per 14.1 of the Electricity Regulation Act. Number 3, nothing in the licensing exemption of the licensing exemption and registration notice as published that talks to establishment of a network to supply end user customers, but only wheeling of the electricity to the point of consumption, which is at the customers. Therefore, Greenstone can only supply its customers through wheeling of its electricity. I hope, Chairperson, I've covered you on the reasons why. Thank you, Chairperson.
Very clear, Mr. Ramkoka. Thank you. Members, you have the submission before you. If we can ask maybe questions of clarity, comments on the submission. I know we may have had an internal workshop on this matter, but we do need to make our decisions based on publicly available evidence and whatever, so we do need to engage with it. Mr. Sibanda, you go first, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, I do support the recommendation. I have a few comments, perhaps just to assist in terms of improving the reasons document. But the first issue that I wanted to check is whether the team managed to collect additional information, as they had indicated previously that they would want to perhaps consult with a few people or get further information. Maybe if they can just clarify that. Excuse me. And then, Chairperson, in terms of our analysis, perhaps we can just improve a little bit. I'm looking at the legal analysis from paragraph 22 onwards, from page, but I can't see the page now. Yes, I just have a concern with that portion of the analysis, and my concern is that we appear to be making a judgment call upfront before we even delve into looking at the the application, the process followed, the public comments and all of that. Already we are making a judgment call or a determination, and perhaps we can deal with that. That legal analysis, to my mind, Chair, perhaps could be moved to where we talk about the NERSA response, which actually should be the analysis of the application. But also, I wasn't too sure whether we need paragraph 26. Just looking at that particular paragraph, it's not clear to me why we have included that. And then paragraph 27, where we say the application is also made without the recognition of the approved rules, which deals with the licensable area position. I'm not sure whether that's correct, to say the application is made without the recognition of these rules. It could be that the applicant has applied, fully aware of what the rules say and all of that, but then it's up to us to then make a decision. But to say it's met without that recognition, I'm not sure if it's a correct reflection of the application. And then paragraph 28 and 29, I think that's the upfront judgment call that I'm saying we're already making that decision, or that taking a stand already upfront before we even get to the application. And to my mind, I think perhaps we can move it. We can move that whole section elsewhere, because we've already dealt with the applicable law and what needs to be, or rather the requirements of the application. So that legal analysis, I think, needs to come after we have dealt with everything else, and then we say, given all of this, given the comments that we have received, given what's contained in the application, what is the position of the regulator? And then paragraph 45. So there we say that the issue of cable and network equipment theft leading to extended outages is a national problem and cannot be resolved by owning a distribution network. Well, we don't then say how that problem can be resolved. So I'm not sure whether it's the correct response again to the concerns raised by a number of stakeholders, that we can simply say, well, you can't resolve that by owning a distribution network, without expanding further as to what needs to happen. And then paragraph 50, that the applicant that can apply for a distribution license in accordance with the rules. Chair, I think we need to clarify the nature of the application that is before us. because when I looked at the application, it said that it's an application for a distribution license. So when we say that they need to apply for a distribution license, again, I'm a bit unsure what exactly we mean. Perhaps we just need to clarify what is the nature of the application that is before us. But certainly, if you look at the letter on page, sorry, I don't think, okay, page 19, it says distribution license application. So maybe clarity on that. And then lastly, for me, under the conclusion, I think we just need to cite specific provisions and not just the broad legislation that the application is not in compliance with the requirements of ERA, the NER, as well as the registration notice. Perhaps let's be clear in terms of which specific provisions are we referring to here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sibanda, for comprehensive input. Advocate Sithole?
Chair, I am a member of the subcommittee and support this particular submission. However, what I do not seem to get is the indication of the consultation by the team with the municipality. I think in one of our sessions where we deliberated on this matter, there was a request that the municipality, which is the city of Joburg, be also consulted, unless the team's view is that having SALGA and MAU as representative of municipalities, then their issues, or rather what they needed to get from the municipalities covered under that. If the team chair can just clarify that for me. That's all I have, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. I think it talks to the first issue also raised by Mr. Sibanda in terms of did we manage to collect the additional information that we promised. Mr. Ramakoka, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me start with the question by Mr. Sibanda, wherein what consultation did we do as a team? I think I will answer this one. On the 25th of March, we called an urgent consultation with all the licensees, ESCOM, AMEU, SALGA, and MISA. That were part of that consultation meeting prior to us going for the public hearing. They also indeed at the public hearing presented their objections and presentations to the energy regulator. Subsequent to our workshops, we also consulted with ESCOM and the applicant, as well as were instructed by the members from the workshop. So we did extensive consultation regarding this application and all related issues around this application. With regard to COJ, we were of the opinion that in consultation with AMEU and SALGA, COJ was covered. However, COJ previously indicated that because it's an area licensed under ESCOM, they would rather not be part of this discussion because of them not even supplying the area concerned. So comments of COJ might have been covered by SALGA, as COJ is the member of SALGA. As it relates to all the corrections that Mr. Sibanda and comments has made, especially on the legal analysis that we have to move it closer to NERSA's response, all these paragraphs that were cited up until to the conclusion, with those citing all the provisions. I think that is noted and will be discussed with legal, especially my Mr. Murati. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ramukoka. I guess we do have time before ER, being the 10th today.
Yes.
So you'll be able to then to effect those changes before ER, those changes at that time, or you'll be able to enhance the RFD as requested by members. Mr. Sibanda, a follow-up, sir?
Yes, Chairperson, I think it will also be important to indicate in the RFD the additional consultation that we undertook and the nature of the information that we sought or that we received, so that it's clear that we did that second round of consultations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. So that's also an enhancement, Mr. Ramukoka, if we can indicate that in the RFD. Okay, so thank you, colleagues. If there are no further questions or comments on the document, can I then direct your eyes to page 6 of the submission? It doesn't have an overstamped number, this one, but it's page 6 of the RFD. The recommendations are on paragraph 9, and we are requested to recommend to the regulator, taking into account all of the enhancements that you've proposed, members. Can I see maybe by show of hands if we can support those recommendations which are on paragraph 9? By show of hands, members. Thank you, Madam Pungose, Mr. Sibanda. Advocate, I know you may have challenges with your...
Yes, with my mouse, Chair, I do support. Yeah. Yes, okay. I support, Chairperson. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you. I do support as well. So, Mr. Ramukoka, you've got your decision. Can we now move on to agenda item number 11, which is a 6-month progress report taken as read. Who's presenting this one, Mr. Mavuso?
This will be done by me, so Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Abinya. If you can proceed now.
Thank you, Mr. Mavuso. Good afternoon, Chairperson and members. On July 2021, NERSA approved a 10-year NPA between Eskom and Hillside. And decision number 8 of the energy regulator requires Eskom to submit progress report for this Hillside NPA 6 months after the effective date and every 6 months until the end of the NPA. This report is in line with the decision of the regulator. And Chair, it is also important to note that all figures in the report are confidential. The report has been assessed in terms of the average price that Eskom has charged to Hillside, the interruptibility, as well as the socio-economic impact. And the details of this analysis are provided on paragraph 5.1 on page 3 of the submission. Chairperson Hillside has complied with the decision of the regulator, and we therefore require that the ELS notes the Hillside 6 months report. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Madam Abinya. Members, as indicated, the numbers are confidential. The report is before us for noting. Any comments, questions to the team? Or is clear enough? Mr. Sibanda?
Yes, thank you, Chairperson, and to the team. Just 1 or 2 questions and maybe comments, Chair, from my side. If you look at tab 1, I see that there was a substantial drop in FEB in terms of consumption, and I'm not too sure what led to that. If the team is privy to that, and perhaps if the information is also not confidential, Chair, but I was just checking what led to that drop. And then on table 2, perhaps we could, I think it will also help just to have the average duration of the interruptibility. So you've got the number of events, and then you've got the total hours, but there's no indication of the average duration. And I know that this is part of the probably the conditions of the application. If I remember that the duration of the interruptibility has to be a certain number of hours. So maybe we can improve on that going forward, and maybe also for future purposes, the columns that are yellow, the headings, they are not clear enough. So one was a bit unsure what that related to. And then, Chairperson, so in the application, there was a whole section around the socioeconomic impact and the positive spin-offs that would emanate from this agreement if it was granted. But now in our analysis, there is very little information, relating to that, or to the positive spin-offs in terms of the socioeconomic impact. And I think, Chair, perhaps again for the next report, I think we should expand really on the socioeconomic impact section. Starting with the direct jobs, which we should have that figure. I know we're saying that we don't have a figure for the indirect jobs, but again, we can probably ask the request this information, Chair, because it was there in the application. Again, there was an estimate of the number of indirect jobs that will be saved and all of that. They also talked about the contribution to the local economy and things like that. So I just feel that perhaps that portion on socioeconomic impact on paragraph 5.2.3, we need to expand on that in the next report, because it is part and parcel of what the applicant had indicated would arise out of this agreement. So we need a sense of whether that is happening or not. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. Any further comments from members? I hand it back to you, Madam Abiy.
Thank you, Mr. Kumete. We've noted Mr. Sibanda's enhancement, and we will improve in the next progress report. Chairperson, and the decline in the consumption is not part of the report. However, with our engagements with Eskom, we will try and enhance and request Eskom to include that information, but currently it is not part of the report. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. By the way, colleagues, it would be useful, I think, Madam Abiy, when you do these things, to maybe let's invest a little bit on our own understanding of the aluminium industry, because, for instance, as you know, that in electricity, with this migration from copper, especially for the pylons or whatever, even for the transmission wires or something like that. If we are migrating towards aluminium, there is value in this. So we need to be able to, I think, add a little bit of color to these things as well. Maybe what we could do is ourselves have, if we can, maybe just for these NPAs that we are approving, if there's an application, for instance, by the ferrochrome industry, that we get a proper report on the ferrochrome industry, so that we have in terms of what the use is in South Africa, the demand, what we import, and so forth. And so that at least I think for the members, as part of the report, they can be reminded of the value, for instance, of the aluminium industry in South Africa. Who are the players, the role played by, for instance, this particular player. So when we enhance in the future, we can do that. I think that may assist. Mr. Sichotlo, I see your hand is up, sir.
No, actually, I was going to go and say exactly what you were saying and add on what you are saying. And I think we support that. And just for the benefit of members, only last week on the 2nd of June, we actually went to go and do a site visit at one of the smelters just to understand the business. And our intention is actually to not just visit those, but the one that we visited was in Rustenburg, Marikana area, Ronderkop, and we decided that at least once in 3 months, we will be visiting the others just so that we can get that kind of understanding. Unfortunately, this is very much new to us, but we understand what the chairperson is saying, and we will do that going forward. Chair, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Shotlo. And members, by the way, although this particular visit was limited to, because it was the first, but we're going to have a few more, the invocation may have only been extended to the full-time members of the regulator and a select few members of staff. We are going to be extending this, especially to the part-time members to all members of the energy regulator. So we get a feel in terms of of the sectors that are consuming this one product that we regulate. Advocate, I see your hand is up. You'd want to add, ma'am?
No, Chair, I just wanted to bring your attention to the input brought in by Ms. Magubane on the issue of interoperability on the chart, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Advocate. So she did respond, Mr. Sibanda, to some of your direct questions. So that maximum of 2 hours is also about the 2 hours. It's what those plants can bear. Because if we don't do that, then there's a serious potential of electrodes being messed up and the furnaces themselves being messed up. So yeah, but thank you, Advocate. So the answer to your question, Mr. Sibanda, Ms. Makwan has responded to directly. Members, unless you have other questions, could I request that we actually note the report? And also for the members of staff to then note the inputs by the members for enhancement as requested in terms of the future reports. So members, by show of hands, if I can take you to the decision that is sought. Thank you, Advocate. Thank you, Madam Pungose. Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. I also support the recommendation, which is recommendation 11, paragraph 11.1. Thank you, members. The second last item is that matter arising. If we can ask that matter arising be reported on. I assume, Mr. Mavuso, this is going to be presented jointly by Mr. Beer and Mr. Ntakeni.
Yes, Chair.
All right. It's a matter arising, and it's considered read. Over to you, Mr. Beer.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairperson, members, and colleagues. I'll be very brief. Essentially, it was a matter arising from last year when there was a lot of discussion and deliberation about the updating or the review of the pricing methodology. Subsequently, a project was initiated under a lot of pressure and with a lot of very tight timelines, and a work plan was agreed. But it was neglected to share that work plan as had been requested in the minutes, which you could see recorded in item 5.3. The exact item of the minutes has actually been reproduced in that matrix, where there was a request that we do a work plan. So this submission is essentially to do that. I've noted the enhancement under 7 to change this to Program 1 regulatory service delivery, and the annexure is the PDF version of the work plan. It's pretty self-explanatory. At this point, as stated, we are about a week behind, but we are making efforts to improve, to recover that slight delay. And we are actually nearing the final stage of a consultation paper, which will be published in due course. And we are also in the process of implementing an urgent procurement for some external support due to some of the shortcomings in the work that was done and what could be offered by Ricardo, who were offered to us for essentially for free in January, February, and March. I'll leave it at that. I don't and ask if there are any questions that people would like to have or clarifications. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pierre. Colleagues, it's a pity that person has been asking almost on a continuous basis for this update. Mr. Nkize is out doing other NESA business because he's been asking for this plan for quite a while. It is before us. Any comments, members? Any questions? Additions, perhaps, if there are any? If not, it is a matter arising. Mr. Sibanda, over to you, sir.
Chair, I don't have a question per se. Just to implore colleagues that let's try by all means to adhere to this plan and the timelines, and also to try and recover some of the time that we have lost. Otherwise, Chair, I guess we will engage with the product once it's ready for the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. The beauty with having a plan is that you can see where we are slipping, which is something that we are trying to get all of us as the members of ELR in particular to do for all of our projects, to have plans like this. It is slow, but I think we will get there, so that at least we can have a level of detail. And as I always say to Mr. Beer here, is that if you have an ELS meeting that is scheduled on the plan, and I don't have it on my diary, that ELS meeting does not exist. So we also still need to then make sure that these plans are actually integrated with RSU plans, especially. We do have members of the committee that are not full-time at NESA, and therefore we shouldn't take that for granted, that if it appears on the plan that that date is secured, until that date has been requested with the members of ER. Those are just my comments. But if there are no further comments on the item, the matter is just here for noting, and also to please note the request by Mr. Sibanda for adherence to the plan, and also to come up with mechanisms to make sure that we can make up the lost time. With that, members, if there are no questions, by show of hands, I assume, Advocate, you are noting, or you've got a comment?
I'm noting, Chairperson, just to also emphasize the point of adherence to the plan, to assist the team that's really organizing these meetings. If members were to respond within a given time frame, it also would help RSU to schedule the meetings, because we tend to get delayed by that, and then we will miss sticking to our plan. So I was just saying, on the member side, if members really, when they get these availability metrics, if they could really respond to them timelessly, such that we proceed with the plan. Otherwise, that delay tends to make the team suffer in terms of what has been planned. Thanks, Chair. I do support the noting, though. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Advocate. I know you're going to have to keep pushing us and to assist. Thank you for supporting the team across the board. Advocate has been trying to support to get us to assist ourselves to be able to make the decisions quickly, that we actually respond. It's noted, Advocate. Members, by show of hands, can we note? Advocate has indicated that she notes. Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. Thank you, Madam Pongose. I also note. So that takes us out of agenda item number 12 to agenda item number 13. I know Madam Kapika is not available today. Mr. Ntanzi, would you assist? Oh yes. Thank Ms. Khabe. Over to you, ma'am.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Yes, she asked me to present it while she's attending another meeting. Chairperson, I can confirm the document that is on the agenda has the latest information as of a week ago with regard to vaccination. Nothing else needed to be highlighted. It can be regarded as read. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Khabe. I think the one thing that I would like to